So everyone, Scott here from Chernobyl Studios, and today we're going to be looking at VIBE Instant Drum Kit from Strezov Sampling. Basically, this is a natural sounding drum kit that can be used for orchestral and rock and even black metal and really even death metal, I suppose, productions. It's a Kontakt instrument. You will need the full version of Kontakt as it says right here. So sorry, the free player version is not supported. So right away, Kontakt required. I really don't want to give too much away about the drums here on the page. Other than that, they are very, very well produced, and the large hall is awesome for incorporating like a nice big room sound, especially when you clamp down with compressors. And the interface here that we see are very clean, very sleek, but we're going to get into all of this, including how you can play this with an actual keyboard if you have one. Anyway, let's go ahead and open the DAW. Let's show you the track that I created. It's not quite finished yet, but you can get a pretty good idea of what this sounds like. So there's a little demo. I actually wrote this song many years ago. Let's see, 2013. It's going about 6 years ago already that I wrote this. And I actually wrote this for a little known game. It might actually be known to you guys. It was for Interstellar Marines when that was released on early access all those many years ago. I believe it was like July 2013 or so. And Carson Bozerup was community manager with some other guy whose name I don't recall. Anyway, I wrote this song just kind of for giggles, and then it ended up being used in a video contest. You can probably still find videos on YouTube with this song on it. So if it sounds familiar to you, that is why I didn't rip it off from anyone. And anyway, let's get into this. Let's see how I use this, and let's start talking about Vibe drums. So here is the interface. It's all multi-routed. Now, right off the bat, a really awesome thing about this product actually is it when you first load it, it's got a full mix button, like it's fully mixed, and that's what this button is right here. When actually it says right here on the bottom, when you switch between this full mix and then like a full mix that they did, it'll purge unused microphone samples from RAM. So actually it'll be very quick for demoing ideas and writing very quickly. But for my case, I wanted to multi-out and have more control over it. And so that's what I did. A really cool thing, actually, also, if you click this gear button, they have multiple microphones for each, basically a kick and a snare. So in, out, and sub, and then up and down and snare batter. You can move these to wherever you want. I actually found them to be quite agreeable right away where they are right now. So I didn't touch these actually. I did play with them. Didn't really like it that much. And the way that they're set actually out of the box is kind of what I like the most. So I kept them right where they are. You will notice that the panning here is down the center, and that's actually one thing right off the bat that I want to sort of touch on. Panning is a bit meh. You're sort of forced into audience perspective, and if you like audience perspective panning, then I guess it's great for you. Personally, because I'm a drummer, I definitely prefer drummer perspective when it comes to drums. Unfortunately, it doesn't really sound like you can get a drummer's perspective panning here. Now, you can actually adjust the width of the stereo field with into mono and the stereo with the overheads and the close and the far rooms. But you would think that, okay, I'll just turn it into a mono track and I'll just adjust the hi-hats to be drummer perspective. Well, the crash cymbals and the China cymbals are stuck within the room and the overhead sounds. So if you make it a mono track, you essentially lose your width. So yeah, you could go ahead and crank these into a mono signal, and then have your toms and your hi-hat and ride panned however you want. But then you're gonna lose out on the width of the room samples, which is a big no-no. You use the room and the overheads. Oh, the overheads is your overall picture of the kit. Then you can use rooms to really bring in, the bigness of the kit, like I've always talked about in my videos. So I sort of was like, well, that kind of sucks. But once I got over that I couldn't use drummer perspective, it's not really a huge deal. I just prefer it. So if you like audience, then none of that matters to you. So while we're still here, let's actually talk about one of the most amazing features with this instrument. Now, if you guys have ever used like Easy Drummer and Superior Drummer and stuff like that, they have grooves, right? Where you can basically drag in MIDI clips, and the person who played it, you can sort of like get that feel of that particular drummer. Now, what they've done here is something similar. If you click Vibes, actually, they have basically two categories of different types of beats that was played by this guy right here, Michael Shack. I hope I'm saying that correctly. It's like funny, all these years of living in Russian-speaking countries, Strezov, Penchev, Kiev. It's not a big deal for me, but I get this name. It's like, what? I don't know what that is. So, essentially, the only thing that you need to really be careful here is that you're using it within the BPM ranges it states specifically. Because, for example, if you have a BPM range that's not within this range, it's like going to cut up the sample. So it'll sound very, very bad. So 4 is on the floor. So essentially what you have now is you have programmable keys right here, which just showed up when I clicked it. I don't know if you noticed that. I don't know if I can turn it off. Anyway, when I clicked it here, zones, right? So they have these zones, right? So basically zone 1. You can program how you want to play it on your keyboard. So if you like hit the button, there, now you're playing a beat, all right? And then you could make it into the next zone and then have another section to play. So it's just like that. So you can have 4s on the floor, you're playing like this. And then you have the next zone that you've set up. Completely different drum sets. Completely different beats. So a massive combination of beats that you can use here to play on your keyboard, do whatever you want to do. Different styles like hardstyle, punk. Obviously not a lot of metal here, because metal is not the primary goal of this particular instrument, I believe. More orchestral and hard rock, but I used it anyway in a metal sense. Really cool if you have a keyboard and you don't want to spend any time at all programming drums like what I opted to do. So that feature is here. Awesome selling point in the feature. Awesome selling point of the program. And as you've already heard, I mean, this is with my EQ settings. I suppose if I turned everything off, let me turn everything off just a second. All right, everything's turned off. The only thing I didn't turn off is my bus compressor and my limiter. The drums are going to have a much louder boxy sound, but that's fine. Here we go. That is a great example of what I was just talking about when you're trying to play grooves that are outside of the BPM range. This is what it'll sound like. So you don't want to do that. I actually don't remember what that is. No idea what that is. Anyway, you would just set it into the tempo range that are listed here. So 150, 160, or 170, or basically within those ranges, like I have here. So that's what it would sound like when it doesn't work correctly. So we have some different time signatures for 4, 3, 4, 5, 8, 7, 8. Pretty cool. Pretty, pretty. I don't want to say standard stuff, but stuff you might find in orchestral or different types of music. Like a 4/4 here. There's a Ghost Note song, really awesome the way he played. Anyway, the drummer performed very well, and that's how it sounds out of the box. Sounds very natural, very clean, well mixed, fantastic. Let's go back into the mixer and let's enable all of my plugins again. On the page, it does says they are one shots, but they do take quite well to velocity editing. You heard it in the mix. I should say that it's just like programming any other kind of drum kit. You want to do the same stuff. We got the tom rolls and stuff. You want to alternate everything. Nothing stays the same. Guys, I will have a very in-depth course about MIDI metal drum programming for Udemy. It'll be done around New Year's, so it'll be coming out soon. I should say also that if you guys have picked up or bought my Udemy course for guitar amp simulators, you're going to get a huge discount on the metal drum programming course. So hit the link in the description to go pick up the amp simulator course so you can get it way discounted, way below what other people are going to get it for. So that plug out of the way. Let's dig into the actual kit, starting with the far room sound, the far room microphone, which I'm telling you adds a lot of depth to these drums. There we go. Obviously, I've crushed these to death. Doing like 10, I believe. Yeah, 10 dB of gain reduction, crushed them. And then I also have a tape emulator saturator from Tone Boosters. These plugins are amazing, by the way. I'll have a video about these pretty soon. And then Fab Filter, obviously taking out all the low end, the mid-rangey bit here, and smoothing out the highs of the cymbals. Nothing crazy. Yeah, that's the far room, and the close room is much of the same. It just has some more immediacy of the drum transients. They're poking through a lot more. And then we have them both together. You get something like this. Yeah, awesome depth to the drums. Overheads themselves are overheads. Let's have a listen. So, a lot of drum in the overheads, actually. And this is where, sort of like, if you want to get really, really detailed and have a lot of control over your drum instrument, this is sort of where Vibe drums is not going to be what you're looking for. Because with Vibe drums, it's really meant as here's your inbox solution, here are your drums, play with them, play live, here you go. When it comes to taking them and dissecting them and using them in each fine detail, there are going to be some limitations. And in this case, you would need to get creative with processing in order to deal with those limitations. So, for example, you have the hi-hat and you have the ride here, right? But all of your cymbals are in your overheads. And if you want to use overheads more for your cymbal perspective, then you have to find a way to get rid of the toms and the snare, which you basically can't. You can use L1 a little bit, which I have, and I'm cutting the snare down a little bit, but you're sort of stuck to using the way that it was mixed into overhead microphones, which is fine because it's mixed quite well, but you're just going to have to use it the way that they wanted in some instances. Keep hitting my mouse scroll wheel by accident. So these are what the overheads sound like. Very, very cool. Let's take off the processing, have a listen. So very punchy, actually, and I'm thinking that maybe I did way too much work here. Let me see something. Nope, I don't think so. It's just so harsh. I don't know. Anyway, so I gotta stop working with that. So here's what I've done. Like I said, I showed already here the EQ. The de-essing is trying to help keep the sizzle and the harshness of the cymbals down a little bit. It was kind of interesting to try to get the cymbals to come up more with the drums kind of sort of being crushed a bit. I maybe suppose could have done some compression. I don't know why I didn't actually. But oh, I did the API. Sorry, I've been experimenting with different types of compression lately. So I've been compressing with the API. Tried to do like 3 compression dB compression here. Yep, just seeing what happens. API compressor really nice and overheads, and that's what the overheads sound like. So we have the overheads and the rooms together. So without those rooms, you can just hear like the stereo width just like collapsing in a little bit. So the rooms and the overheads really great for the overall picture and the width of the drums. Go ahead and turn those off. Now spot cymbals are spot cymbals, but again, uh, you're hearing a lot of information that's not the rag or the hi-hat. So this product is really, really great. But if you want to do like bleed control, you're gonna need to bounce out the tracks and do bleed control that you would do like if you recorded real drums yourself. So you have to bounce these out to wave stems, and you're gonna have to cut where the hi-hat or the ride is not playing. And actually, I opted not to do that. I wanted to show you guys what I was doing here behind the scenes. So that's why, even though I knew that all this extra work that I'm doing is going to change the overall drum sound, I decided to do it that way anyhow. So the spots are the hi-hat and they're panned, I guess, the way that they are in the overheads. Like I already mentioned before, panning was the way it is. So that's what I've done here. So let's go with the ride cymbal. And you'll hear right here, especially, that the MIDI velocity editing is taking very well, so you can hear the exact pulse of the hi-hats that I want you guys to have. Very apparent, very easy to do that. And the same thing with hi-hats and rides. Took out the lows, tamed out the low mids, the boxy area, like very boxy generally in this area, and harshness, taking down the harshness, and the de-esser once again. Tone boosters are killing it. I will have a video about tone boosters. I'm really loving their plugins. Moving on to the toms. All right, toms with this library are amazing. They sound awesome, and they sounded really good out of the box. Just a bit mid-rangey and a bit boxy for me. Box. Let's have a listen. Solo on this here. So here are the toms. Man, this sounds so silky and this sounds so awesome. That's so fantastic. It sounds really, really, really awesome. Let's have a listen to what they sounded like before I did anything to them. Yeah, perfectly in tune. I mean, you heard the ming range and the boxiness yourself, but I didn't have to do a whole lot to these. Just standard EQ, a little bit of top end, taking out the upper mids, low mid garbage. That's really it. Nothing fantastical. Some compression to help the transient, and then a little bit of parallel compression, sort of, kind of, to help once again with the transient of the toms. So with all the compression and the transient attacking that we're doing, this tone booster's real bus helps saturate it a little bit, which softens the overall sound a tad. And then L1, trusty L1, just making sure that no transients go above what we've been doing, because we've really been attacking them quite hard. So this just makes sure that nothing peaks over where we want it to peak. So this brings us up to the snare drum, which we have heard in all the other microphones due to cymbal bleed, or to microphone bleed. And here it is. So I have compressed the bejesus out of this thing. because I like to have a nice snap out of it, but you can hear just how snappy and how organic and awesome it sounds. Let's take off the processing. Oh, I have parallel compression here. We'll take that off. But let's hear what this sounds like, just the way that you would get it. So it does have a little bit of a wood blocky sound to it, which isn't bad if you're into that kind of thing. I just wanted to take the mids out. So we have DF trans here, just a little bit of work on the transient to make it snap a little bit. After that, SSL. I mean, SSL is pretty much, there's almost nothing better than SSL processing on drums. Same deal, you know, taking out low mids, adding some depth because you take so many low mids out, you add some lows back into the snare. A lot of work on the high end to make it cut through the mix. I could have used a bell, I suppose, but I just went with a high shelf instead. After that, taking out some piercing. Essentially, they were piercing frequencies. I'll show you. Very clear. I don't know if that's actually the cymbals, like the hi-hats coming in the snare mic, or what's happening there, but night and day difference. So it's a bit darker and more subdued when with the EQ moves that I made. It was just poking out to me when I did the mix originally, so that's why I did that. Real bust, using it the same way I'm using it with the toms. Smoothing out the high end. It was very, very clear, I believe. When I disabled the plugin, you could definitely hear it. I'll do it again. Yeah, so controlling the high end is very important. I did this a lot simply because of the microphone bleed. I don't know if this would have gone away actually if I had bounced these out now that I think about it, because the microphone bleed is so intense. I wouldn't have manually gated the snare most likely anyway. Just thinking out loud. Okay, so L1, once again, the same reason why we did it on the toms, just controlling the odd peak that would go above this. Then I have parallel compression, which is pretty standard stuff here. Just a teeny tiny bit. Nothing major. So the kick drum. The kick drum with natural drums gonna be kind of a pain. Not a pain because it's poorly recorded. In actuality, it's greatly recorded. Just because the kick drum is so often replaced completely or helped with a sample in a lot of metal music or a lot of busy mixes, because it just does not naturally cut through the mix the way that we're all used to hearing now with the way modern mixing is done. Actually, if you don't believe me, go ahead and listen to old, even like new metal records from the late 90s and 2000s, where they have natural drums on that stuff, and the kick drum is nowhere. I mean, you feel it. You feel it way more than you hear it, but it's not like present and in your face in the mix like a lot of the kick drums are in metal today. However, I wanted to sort of see what I could do. So this is the kick. There's no sample replacement or blending at all here. This is just a straight kick. So let's have a listen to the kick before I did anything to it. So you can hear already yourself. It actually sounds really awesome. It's got a nice slap, attack, nice body and thickness to it, and low end, and the beautiful snare drum that we've come to know and love with all the microphone bleed. So the first thing I did was I wanted to make it more slappy. Wow, that's interesting. I wanted more attack. So I added a little bit more attack with the smack attack, which is Wave's basically transient designer. After that, basic EQ here of the kick, getting rid of the low mids. It's very important that you take care of this section here because your bass lives in this area, and if you have the kick drum and the bass guitar fighting for this area, you're gonna lose. Taking out again more boxiness of the kick drum. Moving on to SSL. Now, so you might be asking, why do I have two versions of SSL? Well, SSL E channel, which is this one, really great for EQ. It has the bells and the shelves that I want. SSL G channel, really awesome compressors, but does not have the bell or the shelf. So that's why I went this way. So let's go with the E channel first. Here are my EQ moves. Have a lot of top end and a ton of 3K so that it cuts through the mix. That's sort of what I had to go crazy with top end processing so that I could get the click and the slap to cut through the mix here, which is exactly what these two moves right here are doing. Next, I am taking out even more low mid I'm just like literally just taking out 15 dB. This is an SSL. You're supposed to do crazy moves like this. Then I'm adding 60 back into the mix, this is where the sub thump comes in. So we're taking out tons of mids, adding top, adding bottom. Basic metal moves that you would always do. And then I have the G channel compressor around 3 or 4, 3.5. Threshold is whatever, but basically fast release. And I'm looking to do 3 to 6 dB of gain reduction just until I can hear the compressor start to basically grab the kick drum and get some nice snap and thickness to it. So here is what it sounds like. Pretty night and day difference to me. And the L1 just for controlling the odd transient, nothing major there. Now on the drums, I once again have some saturation on it to add some distortion and color to the drums overall and smoothen them out a tad. Extra distortion adds a little bit of extra character that I do like. This is my reverb for snare. Nothing. It's a Bricasti, I believe. Yeah, the Bricasti M7. And then SSL comp for parallel compression, smashing the bejesus out of it. And those are the drums. I have not processed them in any way different than I normally would have. Let's go ahead and just listen to the drums by themselves. Drums, parallel compression. Okay, here we go. So that pretty much covers it for my review, guys. In general, the instrument is fantastic. It's very well designed, very professional looking, very sleek. It takes to extra processing very well, especially the toms. I actually really like the toms in this particular library. The vibes feature here, fantastic idea if you have just a keyboard, you don't want to do any MIDI programming, but you want to have some nice grooves to play with and you don't want to shell out for a superior drummer. Very much a contender and something you might want to look into. As well as coming very well blended and mixed in the box, they come with a full mix on or off option, which I explained in the video. If it's on, this is what you see. Everything is in one instrument, and microphones that aren't being used are purged, so you're saving a lot of RAM. But then you can turn it off or turn it on, have multi-out routing, have all the different type of microphone samples that you want to use, And really, as far as things I did not like that much, it's very few. So two of them are very nitpicky, like the panning. Being an audience perspective pan, it seems like that's sort of the option that's the sort of the way that you have to go. The second thing is this library can take a long time to load if you do not do a batch resave. So definitely recommend immediately once you grab this thing and you load it into Kontakt, do a batch resave so that it loads much, much quicker. And finally, the biggest criticism I suppose I would have would be the bleed within the microphones. Now, it would sound funny that I'd be complaining about that because bleed is one of the very things that make drums sound so realistic. But when it comes to processing them or really wanting to have a lot more control, you're gonna run into some issues. You're gonna have to do some extra things like bouncing out this tracks into audio stems and then editing them. Whereas in other instruments, you may be able to just like turn the bleed off, stuff like that. So very nitpicky, and just in my opinion. Okay, guys, so that does it for this review. If you found the video useful, please hit subscribe, like, share, the bell notification, and then probably pretty soon a DNA test, blood drawing, sperm samples, all that stuff that's coming soon in the future, just so that you could get my future videos. Gosh, I hope that's not true. Hope we don't have to do that. No, but really, please consider subscribing and liking if you do like the video. It helps me a lot. Have videos just like this coming in the future. Remember, we're gonna go over metal MIDI drum programming. I'm making a course right now for Udemy. It's gonna be in depth. I'm actually gonna show you exactly how to program metal drums the right way, the beats, what you need to do, everything. And if you are part of my Amp Simulator Udemy course, you already know the detail and the length that I'm gonna go because you saw how much detail I put into the Amp Simulator course. By the way, follow me on Instagram. I'm actually starting to use that, and my beautiful girl is helping me take pictures and all that wonderful stuffages so that it's actually an interesting thing to look at. Also, hit me up on Facebook. I'm basically everywhere. Facebook, Instagram. I'm on Twitter, but I barely use that. And yeah, so subscribe, leave a comment, and my Discord is always there too. We have over 100 people now. It's a good time. A lot of people are helpful there. A lot of trolling, a lot of good stuff. All right.